Amen. There are stories you need to know. Not just Bible stories that you need to know. There are stories you need to know. We need to know each other's stories. We need to know our own stories. We need to know these things because they're the stories that inform us. They help us understand ourselves, our relationship with ourselves, each other and our relationship with each other, the earth and our relationship with it, even God and our relationship with God. That's what stories do, because we live in story. Some of those stories are long. History. Some of those stories are very short. I was over there, now I am here. How did I get here? Stories, they're all different, but they're all necessary because they help us understand. And they help us understand in a very practical way. They help us understand intellectually. They help us understand emotionally, even spiritually. They help us to grow and be more of who we are. Stories have power. The thing is, sometimes the interpretation of the story, one person's or a group's interpretation of a story, becomes more important than the story itself. Sometimes the interpretation of the story, or how it speaks to a certain person or a certain group of people, takes over from the story. You don't need to know that story anymore. I've told you what it means. So let me tell you the story of Adam and Eve, and this moment that in the church we traditionally refer to as the fall, or even more traditionally, the fall of man, and the moment of original sin. Everything was good. It was all good. In fact, to quote the Lego movie, everything was awesome. It was great. And then one day, the devil appeared as a snake and tricked woman into eating an apple from the tree that God said they shouldn't eat from. And then the woman seduced the man into eating from the same tree. They were delicious apples. And then they realized they were naked. And of course, they did the first thing that anyone does when you got a man and a woman together and they're naked. Not that, they got dressed. And then they hid because they were afraid of God. They knew they'd done something wrong. So somehow they managed to hide from God. But God found them, of course, because God is God. And God said, so what is this? Did you eat from the tree? And immediately, of course, woman blamed the snake who tricked her. And then the man blamed the woman, of course. And as a result of which, God punished everyone. God punished the snake, God punished woman, God punished man, and then, to top it all off, God kicked them out of the Garden of Eden. That's how the story goes. I didn't need to waste all that time reading it for you. That's how it goes. I have told you, now you know. And you have known for thousands of years because that's how we've told the story. Is that really how the story goes? Of course it is, because it tells us three very important things that you need to know. Number one, the fall. This is why we're here in this hellscape of whatever this is. Number two, the reason for that is original sin. We're all sinners. We're inherently sinful thanks to Adam and Eve. Or more importantly, Eve and Adam. Because the third thing you need to know from this story is that it's all woman's fault. You laugh, but there are still traditions who tell the story that way and still emphasize those three key things from that story, including that man will have control. Okay, if that's your interpretation, but please acknowledge that's your interpretation and not the story. I'm going to throw out an interpretation of the story for you. I don't demand that you believe it. I don't demand that you adopt it as your story of religion. I'm just going to throw out a few ideas. My hope is that you'll think about it, read the story again, and maybe think about it some more, because the story tells us some really important stuff that we should know. And it's not that you're inherently sinful. It's not that this isn't Eden. And it sure as hell isn't that men are in charge. What if the story is really like this? Everything is good. It's still good. There's nothing in the story that indicates that the snake is a devil. In fact, at best, the snake might be interpreted as being the biblical understanding of the Satan, a tempter, the one who asks the questions that causes you to think more about it. That's what Satan means. It doesn't mean the devil. It means someone who tests you. So the snake tells Eve, who hasn't even been named that yet, about the tree, and provides her with an absolutely reasonable argument as to why she should want to eat from the tree even though God said not to. Eve then thinks about it, makes a reasoned decision, and chooses to eat the apple. Oh, wait, hang on. Nothing in the story says it's an apple. It just says fruit of the tree. We made it an apple because we live where apples grow. That's right, we owned the story from someone else. So, woman eats the fruit. Along comes a man and says, what do you got there? Ooh, it's a delicious fruit. And gives Adam the same information that Eve had from the snake. Adam then makes an informed decision and chooses to also eat. As a result of which, a consequence of which, they're aware. They're aware. And see, I don't think they're just aware that they're naked. I think that they're aware that they are aware. That's why they feel naked. They feel naked because they're aware. And what they're aware of is that they suddenly know stuff. They have choices to make, the decisions to make. And the first decision that they make is to try and hide from God. How do you hide from the presence of God when the presence of God is in all of creation? Well, you can't. Surprise there. So God knows where they are. What happened? Well, you were caught out. What are you going to do? I'm going to blame somebody else. Because I'm smart enough now that I know that'll get me out of it. It was a snake. And then, of course, a man blames a woman. And I imagine, since we're anthropomorphizing this whole story, God went, you can't blame others for the choice that you just made. Because that's what you did. You made a choice. And see, I think God knew all along. In fact, I think God set it up so they do that. That's right. It was a setup so that the first humans would learn to choose. And then they'd have to learn about something else. Consequences of their choices. So, if we're going to talk about an original consequence of this moment, let's talk about the original consequence of this moment. The original consequence of this moment is they are aware. They're not sinful, they're aware. That's the very first thing that happens. And I think that's the point of the story. We have choice. We have free will. And as a consequence of that free will, we now have responsibility. Rather than being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, I imagine us leaping out of the Garden of Eden with this new responsibility to do stuff, and God going, "Yay, it's about time you left home. Don't come back." For a while. Learn, grow, do stuff. You'll come back. You will. Because I think it's also the other point of the story is, this is the garden. We're in it. We're in it. The difference between this and the Garden of Eden in the story is the Garden of Eden is the presence of God. We are within the presence of God. That's how the story starts out. Remember the creation story? Everything's good? I should say stories, because there's two, remember? Two creation stories in Genesis? We tend to mush them together. And when we do, we get this. Everything that's created is good. Everything. Each day ends with, God saw that it was good, remember? And then God creates human beings. But everything that was created by the Spirit of God. And human beings were created from the Spirit of God and of the earth. We're connected to both. We're connected to both. We are of both. And so Eden is really just being within the presence of God. And as we strike out and start to make choices, and there are consequences, and we have responsibility, and all of that stuff happens, I think what happens is that we drift into our of the earth side. And then we realize we have power over the earth. Not stewardship of it, but dominion. I hate that word. Because it somehow implies we have power over it. And originally, we were created of the earth. We have power with the earth. We have power with each other. We have power with the divine spirit that is within all of us, which is the point of Jesus and others throughout all the Bible stories. Those figures who try to lead us back to, Eden, the presence of God, that try to reconnect us with the divine spirit that's in each of us. So it's a great story. That's awesome. What does that mean? See, I think what we made it mean was you're all inherently sinful. Jesus saves us, and you need me, a man, by the way, you need me to get to God. No, you don't. No, no, and no. Your factory setting is good. You are good. We make bad choices. There are consequences of those bad choices. We call it sin. But those choices, those bad choices, are the choices that distance us from God. That's what they do. When we make choices that bring us closer to God, we choose to love. We choose to care. We choose to offer grace. We choose to live in grace with each other. Your factory setting is good. It is within you to be good. The divine spirit is in you, as is the earth. You are not just of dust, you are of God. You have free will to choose. So, will you make choices that bring you closer to God, to the presence of God, to the Eden of the story? Those are the choices that connect us not only with each other, but connect us with the earth again. Last fall, we did a little study group, thanks to Alan Richards, about creation and finding the creation story in the Bible. And one of the things that was most, for me, most illuminating about that whole thing was the idea that in indigenous stories of creation, the emphasis is on relationship. We are related not only to the power of life, God, but to each other. We're connected. And most importantly, to the earth. We are connected. We are all connected. And what's the most important story we tell about the beginning? How we broke that connection and were cast out. It's no wonder we think we're all sinners and we need a Savior. You know, someone will do all of the saving work for us. Well, no, you have work to do too. And that work is understanding you are good. The divine spirit and the earth are within you, and you are connected to those things and to each other. And we have choice. And we can choose. We can choose to offer love and grace and kindness and care. We can choose to understand. We can choose to listen to other people's stories and share our own so that we can be even better connected and build stronger relationships. Or we can choose not to. We can choose to break those relationships. We can choose to not share equitably power and resources and life with each other. So what will you choose? See, I think that's the biggest thing from the story. Original sin, the fall, all that other stuff. The most important thing in this story is choice. And what choice will you make? Will you choose to come into the presence of God? Or will you choose power in this moment that doesn't last? Will you choose to not care about others? Will you choose to not be in relationship with the people and the world around you? Will you choose the individual over the connectedness of all things? Choose wisely.